Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday. It is. It's definitely still Wednesday, and that means it's time for a new viewer track review video. And today we're going to begin with Propean Lunacy, which is the music alias of one of the mods in my Discord channel. They got picked in the thing, and it is a sound design reel, and I'm interested in what that is and what these sound like, so let's have a go at that. Okay. Oh, this was titled 19 to 20, so I assume that you have a whole bunch of these, which is good because you'd want to have more than just this, I suppose. Though, so I have to wonder how I'm going to grade this one because my own experience in attempting to gain jobs to do sound design work, and where I have attempted to create a portfolio to be like, here, look at the stuff I've done. That's never been the thing that's gotten me the jobs. Like my whole plan on doing the YouTube channel the way that I have is essentially to use that to get me the jobs, essentially because I could not figure out how to get like what criteria people were even looking for in a demo reel. These days, it's even harder because of the how available sounds like this are, and I gotta wonder what the targets are, and not just for you or what you were trying to do, but for like what even would be a good target. There's always the good answer of just do the best thing anyone's ever heard. Be perfectly unique at all times to make sure that there is no competition. But, if we could do that, we wouldn't be having this discussion, would we? But in sort of practical terms, the sort of gigs, like, what gigs are we imagining that this will sort of enable? Because what I think this will get you is a job that, like, someone who wants to make a pack will take this and be like, okay, I'll have you. I want you to make a pack of this stuff, and then look at all your sound design reels and be like, cool, good, 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 good. Then they'll give you a bunch of parameters and let you go. And if that's what you're aiming for, then congrats. This is great. They'll love this. Um, and if you're angling to be like the guy in the company, right? Like a stable, I'm employed by X developer as the guy that makes sound effects. The demo reel is useless. That they don't care at all about that. Like at that point, it's about credits and things. And I wonder if doing packs counts. Probably not, especially in video games. They definitely specify they want video game experience, but at that point, it's not even really about the fact that you can do things. They pretty well assume that if anyone's in any of these buildings that do any of these things, that you already have the requisite capacity to do the art. After that, it's all about, can you demonstrate your ability to function in an environment that generates the products that they're there to make? And that's why they look for credits, because that's pretty well the only way you can tell. How the hell do you get those jobs besides you just know people? And that's the age-old problem. And same with sort of any other kind of art, big AAA example where you have demo reels and be like, oh, I'm doing this cool thing. Like you try to do what they're doing. It's not even that they did it that was the cool thing. It was that they had the time working with the person to do it that worked well enough that they liked it. Like when Christopher Nolan does a movie and he always gets Hans Zimmer, or when Lucas or Spielberg do anything and Williams is their first target. It's about the music they can make, but like any of us could eventually make the music that they make just by examining what they've done and copying it. It would not be hard for there to be Aruma interns to copy the stuff, because there already are Aruma interns that copies the stuff, because that's how arrangers work. But the point is that what the directors cared about was that when they said words, those guys understood what they were talking about and delivered a render of what they wanted. That's the skill that nets you those jobs. And it's so not possible to demonstrate that you can do that with just a demo reel. Even like a demo reel of like attached to a concept. Like I generally associate doing an audio visual job that like I'm doing audio for visuals as a kind of job that does these things. And in those examples, like even if you've got a reel put to video, there's no way of telling whether or not that took 10 years to do because you were such a terror to work with that it was like pulling teeth, or if it was done in 4 seconds because you did everything and you're some kind of super genius that working with is like pulling teeth, or if you actually worked with a team that did it and you did your job the way that like you were there to show up to do, got nobody's way and were the easiest person to work with. Those are the qualities that like the AAA stuff. I have no idea this was any of what you're even trying to do with making these reels. So the whole question, because the sounds are fine, obviously. I like the sounds, but like the question is like, what are they for? What's the context? What's the standard by which to compare this stuff to? I ain't got nothing. I have no idea. Like as far as how did it sound cool? Like I like this guy. I like this texture a lot. I actually had a lot of fun with this one because what I thought was happening for a second was that this was a recording of like a train track going by, and it's not so much. It's pretty much it's noise. I'm pretty sure, but it's really interesting noise. Congratulations, you've made me say that out loud. And it actually made me think for a second how cool it would be if I just figured I gotta just synthesize train car sounds and scored a movie and no one noticed. Like that, I was having that thought while I was listening to that. So good job there. And this got a little weird. Not so much that the sound was bad, but like the first time you do one of those chords, I thought it was a mistake until the very last time where you did 2 in a row, and I was like, oh. And it wasn't so much because it was bad; it was just out of place. You don't ever do that. Then you do it, and it feels kind of out there. But the sound itself has interesting qualities in it, and what's the most sort of relevant experience I have with this in particular was someone who literally came to me to try and make impact sounds. I don't mean Fixed. Fixed did that too, though. When I was with them, one of the things that they wanted impacts that they could like license off to films and movies, because those like trailer sounds like all that stuff. Like they love it. They love billions of those, and they need billions of them because they get used fast. And also sometimes they want to be original, sometimes. And the easiest way to be original is just to get a new fresh pack from some people who put out stuff that they like regularly. And that's part of how that whole thing works. But it would be one of these and then like 30 different ones. That's sort of what they are. And this guy being mostly the same the whole time wasn't as worthy as liked, I think. If you wanted to show off its melodic capacity, I think still doing what you did, like here, could just have been half as long. Like, cool, this guy's here, this guy's there, done. Not bad. Ultimately not bad, even for being just a reel. So, cool beans, Propean Lunacy. Up next, we have Meakashi. Yes, I believe. Yes. And then with Demonic. Wow, look at that high pass. Okay, let's, Here comes the sauce. Always with that. Here, there, everywhere. Cool. Indeed. So that was loud and awesome and fun, and cut completely at what looks like the Harmer cut, 17K. Which also, this is a WAV file. So why did you resample every single thing in this track in Harmer? Did you resample the entire track into Harmer? That's interesting. I was noting fun times while we were listening to this, like this guy, for example. It was fun how good and sharp the cuts were, and there was basically no mud. You can tell because of how well clearly you can see these cuts happening. A real comb filter that would be doing this would be devastating, but because this is a Harmer shenanigan, it gets to look like that. At least I assume. I assume a lot about this track. This is an interesting look. That might not have been a Harmer thing, but that leads me to believe it is for how clean it is. So some things though, mostly this thing. Beat that kind of comes in here. It's like, it's the most out of place element in this track, and it's mostly, I think, because of how tightly focused the mix for mixing to the drops this track is. Because these parts in general that aren't the drop or don't have the drop content in it tend to feel lackluster, and it's because they don't have the high frequency power that the rest of it does. I really mean that specifically because if you think about it, speed is frequency, and frequency is speed. And if a thing like has sharp attack and impact to it, like not even just the kicks and snares, like this bass that comes on. A lot of them do. And that's because its highest frequencies are like active on when they're on, versus what's going on out here. Not a lot of high frequencies are present, and when they are there's a bit of a flush to them, and that makes it. That's not just what darkness is. It's also a thing that makes it feel like it doesn't have as much impact. It's because it doesn't have that cone of high frequency capping it off like the rest of the stuff does. And it sounds like it. And so it sounds kind of, I mean, all you need to do to make this feel a little slightly more balanced is either like just do something more intentionally effectively on the drums that are here, or like just switch them out for the real ones every once in a while to kind of like prep, and to note that they're intro drums. Because this does remind me a lot of kind of tracks I used to do. Not necessarily dubstep wise, but like this kind of melodic structure on stuff. I was something I used to do kind of a lot back in the day before I figured out the dubstep. And all of that was great. The sound's very harsh and straightforward, and sound design was good. And like despite what appears to have been resampling of the entire thing, this track doesn't sound that bad. Like for it, like I would expect an issue to be present there, but it's not that dead for it. So good job, I guess. I say I guess because like I really would. That's really one of the reasons why I don't just do that. Like that was one of the first things I thought of when I started doing armor resampling, was just like, why don't I just put the whole song in there? And that cut being there is one of the reasons why. But if I did every single thing individually, but even if I did, like that, this is here. So you can see how the air is cut off. That's a bit how I know it's kind of resampling related. Unless you just put a really sharp cut up there intentionally after the fact, which would be an even weirder choice, although people have made that choice before. And maybe it was one of your tracks that choice is made on. If it is, then I guess I've already said enough. All right, moving on. We have Kaminari Night with Aurora. Whip. All right, here we go. Cool. That was a lot of stuff. Like, that was so many kinds of thing. I say because so when initially this was, I'm super into this bit, like, because I've just been listening to a lot of like really old breakbeat, and this doesn't sound anything like that stuff, but I'm in the break mood, so this being the thing that's happening is something I'm good about right now. What is this? Symbols. So this is all lovely. Put like the texture and put together. Awesome. I also like the output of this, like the ARPs and stuff. Like, big fan. This onslaught of just things that happen is just so much. That's a lot. And like, I gotta say though, I like all the sounds that are happening. I like all the stuff, the change ups, the different dips. The only bummer is this part kind of feels just slightly off time. And I'm sure you were probably not so much fighting with it, but it's sort of just determining what felt like the right amount of rhythm or whatever. But like this, not so much for me. Like, I get that it probably made this feel right, like for it to not be less than that. Like, it really does feel a little like a bouncy thing, and not so much like a. I mean, if that was really what you were intending for it to feel like one element, then it does feel more one elementy than less so the rhythmic kind of like oompa effect. It is actually just the oompa effect. But nothing really else is to say about that. Like, if you like how that was, if that was the distribution you were going for, then hooray. The mix about it is fine. I have a presence on all things, and nothing is really like that offensive about all that. Like, the higher frequency presence is pretty much perfect. When I'm always talking about stuff being top heavy, this is sort of what it looks like when it's not. This worked out pretty well, ultimately. A lot of really cool sound design for how well it went up here. Honestly, I feel like if you play this at a show, people wouldn't know what to do with their hands after the first like minute. They think it's a thing of what it is, and it's like you're fighting the listener. You're challenging them to get used to a groove just so that you can wig them around with it the next time around. Like this really does feel like that kind of experience, and I dig it. I dig the crap out of that. All right, good job. Good job. Plus the dynamics of the areas were all pretty well aligned. It's not very loud, but you know, I guess this is still a whip, because whip is in the name. Up next, we have Prophecy of the End by Madamar. Woo! Woo! Oh, this is gonna be good, or at least very loud. Okay, here comes this. Wow. I say wow for lots of reasons. This is about as long as I thought it'd be when I'm just by looking at it. This is also sort of what top heavy looks like. I have this experience a lot when I use samples either from packs or from what's in FL. But if you just use the crash samples that are there or the hat samples or whatever, they're not really at their intended volumes. They're actually quite like 10 times louder than they would ever be used in any context that they're designed for. Like how loud the crashes are in this track is indicative of an issue because that's how loud everything is in this track. Everything. This has such a like everything at once itis. It's kind of amazing. And the other thing that's wow is sort of the vehicle through this amazingness. Like I'm not sure. So, because it's not like I don't want stuff to be crushed like this. It's just that the reason we sidechain stuff so hard is because we're going to crush it like this. And you can kind of tell that that's not really the case. You can tell some stuff sidechained, but I'm like, all the kick cuts through the bass just fine. But the highest elements are just painting over things. It just looks like a big blur relative to what we're used to seeing, right? And that element is like visually and an audible experience. And what it resulted in is like, this sound is cool as hell, but this is like a burning experience to feel the whole spectrum be like this, without like commensurately like the rest of the stuff being either more or above it. And that's sort of, you can get power to be arranged as such, like, because you can get even tighter with the sidechain, not just make it faster, but do things like only sidechain the bass kick to the bass, and like it's other things so that things are transparent. But if you get too transparent, stuff sounds like this, where suddenly it's getting pretty close to like actual noise because the full spectrum is active the whole time. It's a feat to get anything in a position to be doing this and even be legible. But one of the sort of disadvantages of doing that is that like your beat is barely unheard, like barely heard at all, because the main basses and main other things elements are louder than everything. Like the music and the pads and the textures are all super cool. It's just that like most of those instruments don't even need to be half as loud as they are. But like the main ones that do and totally rock being the way they are, like the main bass and the kick and all that stuff. It's super great. I was going to say, oh yeah, and the other wow, the last wow, is that I make jokes about what happens when a song is like this, about how I could turn it down and still, like here's unside chain and there's a little side chain. It looks like I can turn it down and I'll still be able to hear everything so perfectly as though I'm hearing it at its maximum level. If you high passed this track, it'll probably sound just as loud and just as legible to the degree where this would actually make perfect background music for a video game, where like you just cut out the power at the low end where all the booms are, and like because then you could turn this down to like 30% level and you would still hear it like clear as day, and that would be an ideal result for an environment like that. Of course, it would sound like crap, like listening to it by itself like that, but that's sort of why it's like a specialized, specific thing. In real life, though, when we actually listen to this stuff, sometimes breathing room is necessary. Not just for our personal comfort, but just so that we can tell what's happening. Like, I imagine in our next example, we'll either see something that's like what I just described, or somehow farther than this. All right, but ultimately, I like the cinematic nature of this track, the flow of it. Like, your ideas of how the transition should go and how the flow should be are all fine. It was all very actionable. Like, I was not bored by this track, so good job that. Moving on, we have INFJ with Spectacle, with the MP3 that spelled it incorrectly is supposedly what they had said. And by supposedly, I mean that's absolutely what they say. The supposedness is that's what transpired. The result is a file. Wow. Okay, that explains. I don't know what that needs. It's called Spectacle. Okay, here we go. Cool. One quick second. Whap. It sounded like the PlayStation intro a little. Excuse me. Wow. Thanks, my face. Anyway, this was really dope. I like the beat a lot. This was a really interesting application of a lot of things. This kind of sounds like if The Weeknd made bass music. That's what this sort of is. This feels like a really up on version of one of their tracks, and that's really awesome because I like that. I like that stuff. That kind of is that considered hip hop? It's hard for me to tell these days, but that like R&B-ish, tone-ish feel, and like the traveling with the elements on it, and like and also the elements are all really cool. Like, and they were all contrasted with super basic things, and that's something I think is very elegant about this. The presentation makes it it doesn't take, like, I was thinking about this guy primarily. This like, it's just a sine wave and some stuff. It's like not a lot, and like this is on some stuff happening. It's interesting that we were able to have a relatively complicated melody going on here with a relatively complicated bass line and a complicated beat. The beats in here are nuts. Like, they're not so crazy or outlandish, but they tend to be hard to work with because they are more engaging than your typical two-step or four-on-floor action, which makes them hard to write for. And like, they're really good job. It's a very good job. So win, individual. Up next, we have Chase Dunkley with Overcast, which has been my life for a while. Oh, this progresses. This should be fun. wasn't that beautiful. It's very nice, extremely well done, well layered, well accomplished individual elements. Like, this is perfect. I really have nothing to say about it. Okay, so for listening, I got nothing but praises to say for this, especially if like me, when you were trying to do this, you might have went and referenced some similar kind of feeling elements from people like Two Steps from Hell or something like that. Those are my personal go-tos for any kind of non-electronic atmospheric creation. That seems like the thing that they're good at. You might notice that they're really bassy in their stuff. I definitely noted that when I tried to do like my Zimmer moment. Which is interesting because when you look at what ends up in the films, they tend not to be that bassy. Like, I was just talking about that about the other guy about the game track, and it's for pretty much the same reasons. To that end, though, the low ends on those mixes are just not this well represented. But it's really cool that they are in this track. Like, what's really cool about doing a big build-up like this is that you get like trained. Your brain is now this. Like, you see this, like this line or whatever is like happening in your head right now, which means every individual note that gets played, even if it itself is not a harmony, is a harmony. Because even if you don't do interval training, even if you don't know that, like, you could feel it as an effect on you. You can also feel it because it's still here and it's still giving us to know the original thing, but like it's really translated in there beyond that because of how long we've been on it beforehand. And it really makes something straightforward like this have incredible power, which is a really good way to sum up why people like Hans Zimmer so much. When I was learning up on music theory and sort of being trained on what's considered good and bad and whatnot, like, Zimmer is kind of the antithesis of all of that. Like, he's parallel fifths and octaves all day. He repeats everything. It's so basic. There's almost nothing. But what is mostly what he's doing is, like, you see how this kind of happens, and then there's this sort of big, like this sort of vision of spectral fitting together is the job of what those instruments are and has been performed for still needing to do that. But during times when computers and stuff didn't exist, when orchestras were the whole thing, their instrumentation was designed to still fit in the ranges that like that's why that works. And that's why this whole thing works. And it works because of the just the basic truth of it. And so you just be basic about it. Like, have a range, exist in the moment, and the easiest way to do that is just to be harmonic. And it just feels good. So that, like, it translates well through this. And this is a very good example of that entire idea. So, good job. Very good job. Moving on, we have Tobe with, maybe Tobe, Low Life Riddim. That's some high passing. All right, here comes this. Dang. So here's something funny. I was about to be all, okay, well, this was too repetitive. Like it's supposed to be repetitive, and it's not like that much too repetitive. It's actually very not that repetitive for what it is, because if this kind of thing that happens this often, this pulsatingly, got any a percentage repetitive, it would get old so fast. It didn't really get old. Like it did enough different stuff, even though that was just mostly the same beat. But the change in rhythm came basically at the end here. And my first thought might be, well, you should do this change in rhythm earlier. You should do this more. But if you did that, though, that might actually make it older faster. And the fact, though, that we were trained essentially that this was the whole way, the whole time, it made this more interesting. It actually made the fact that this is a different rhythm something that feels like rare, because we've defined the universe so far as one that does not do this as a result of having this resulting previous experience. That's something cool about this. This is one of these tracks that like people would listen to in 2009. Like they wouldn't sound anywhere near as good, but this is that kind of track that people would listen to and claim isn't music because they don't really get what dubstep is as an experience. And this is really such like a spot on nailed experience of what this kind of dubstep is like. This is great. The hi-hats are so loud. Your high frequencies are too much. Pretty much just the hat. It's pretty much just the hi-hat. Like that's way too loud and also way too loud all the way up to the top. Is this a waveform? This is a wave file. It is a wave file, so it's not that big a deal, but that's gonna come off juicy in the wave and the MP3 conversion on SoundCloud. You know what I mean? That's really the only reason why I care about that. Other than the fact that it's kind of painful at those levels, it's just that MP3 problem. It's compressed streamed formats. I would really recommend rolling off more on the highs on this. Like all the rest of this is perfect. Like it's just so very on and so very this. I would put this in a playlist. Like if it weren't for the hats, I'm really making a big deal about that. Like it's not so much that it wouldn't even be much, like just 30% less. That's not that much. It would sound a lot better. But the reason this makes good playlist fodder is mostly because of how homogenous it is with itself. Oh, you do the thing before. I just forget this happened. You know, I knew when I was saying it that like I don't actually know that it doesn't happen. I must have just forgot. That must be why it didn't get old, because it didn't get old. You switched it up. Fascinating. So that must be why I didn't think it got old. Well, cool. Everything I said about that being a bad idea was wrong. Because you did it, and it was a good idea. Like I'm mostly poking around, still being flabbergasted with how well you managed to make something that's just really not that like. The sound is very engaging for not being a lot. Not so much because I don't think the sound is complicated or anything, but it doesn't exist for very long, so it's hard for it to literally say anything at all. And like the fades and the variations are cool, but even just the moving of it is nice. And it's regular enough, and the punch is punchy and hard enough. Like the kick and the snare mix on this is great. In general, like the dynamic range distribution for being this loud is crafted. I'll tell you what. So good job there. Yeah. Good job, Tobe. Or Toby. Probably Toby. I genuinely have never met anybody named Tobe. Right on. If you'd like to have one of your tracks featured in one of these videos, head on over to the Discord channel where the submission thing exists. Follow the instructions and be helped by mods when they give you help, because if I can't access your file, then I can't do the thing. If you have any questions about that or this or things, let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.